Okay, let's continue with the lecture. The most important way in which the transmigrating soul understanding of the birth, death, rebirth, re-death cycle is deeply non-Buddhist is that the Buddhist tradition rejects the idea that there is a soul or enduring mind, self, or person. For Buddhism, no soul travels from life to life or even exists within a single lifetime. To believe in an enduring soul is to cling to ignorance and prevent enlightenment. This raises the question of what, for the Buddhists, replaces the concept of the soul. If there is a cycle of rebirth, something or other must be reborn. The most straightforward Buddhist answer is that what you are is simply a collection of momentary states. If the reincarnation karma story is taken literally, this series of these collections is what transmigrates from lifetime to lifetime. But perhaps the talk of a cycle of rebirth is not to be taken literally. What if it is seen as merely a rough approximation of something very different, a way of getting people started on a journey of religious learning that leads to enlightenment? Talk of rebirth would then be a kind of skillful means intended to prod people along the spiritual journey to the point where they are in a position to attain enlightenment. In sum, one literal way of reading the doctrines of rebirth and karma says that an enduring soul migrates from lifetime to lifetime, receiving the consequences of earlier actions. This is the way that monotheistic Hinduism and Jainism understand the story. The central way in which this reading is eminently non Buddhist, however, lies in its ideas that there is an enduring soul. The question for the Buddhist tradition is not how exactly to conceive of this enduring entity, but rather how to reductively analyze or replace the mistaken idea of such a soul. Let's look at impermanence, no self, and dependent co origination. The Buddhist tradition contains various accounts of how the escape from rebirth provided by enlightenment can be attained. Although they differ in some respects, the accounts agree that seeing things as they really are is central to becoming enlightened. The ordinary common sense view of how things are, including the belief that people have enduring minds or souls, is rejected by most Buddhist traditions. This is seen as a core mistake of common sense. Another basic error of common sense belief is said to be the idea that things have natures or essences. There are features that a cow, for example, must have in order to be a cow. But the Buddhist tradition typically denies that any composite has a nature, meaning any thing made up of smaller parts. Furthermore, nothing with or without essence can exist independently. Any such thing exists in mutual dependence on other things that also are without essence. To believe otherwise is to fail to see things as they are, to be ignorant, and to be unenlightened. Now, it is by no means obvious that nothing endures, that there are no enduring souls or minds, or that nothing has a nature. The Buddhist tradition grants that belief in enduring things, including ourselves, and that things belong to kinds or categories without enlightenment, is present in us all. But these very natural beliefs are, in fact, false. There have developed within Buddhism strategies for dealing with the fact that we have these beliefs. Following are some central concepts relevant to these Buddhist strategies. First, there is the concept of a construct. A construct is something constructed. Constructs are concepts that do not fit anything that actually exists. What actually exists is very different from what the constructs represent as existing. The constructs are kind of models, but not the thing itself. So one common Buddhist strategy is to treat the concept of a soul, mind, self, or person as only a construct. Second, there is the concept of reductive analysis. In this case, the individual parts of a complex thing are listed, and then it is asserted that the complex thing just is the parts, that the whole is nothing more than the parts together. This is illustrated in a famous conversation between the Buddhist Nagasena and King Milinda. When the king states that he came in a chariot, Nagasena tries to show the king that there is no chariot beyond the various constituent parts associated with the word chariot. Nagasena proceeds to ask if the chariot should be identified with each part of the chariot, each time eliciting from the king the answer that that particular part does not constitute the chariot. Finally, Nagasena asks if the chariot is something else besides all the parts, to which the king also answers no. Nagasena draws the desired conclusion. There is no chariot beyond the parts enumerated. He then applies this analysis to the conventional idea of an enduring person or soul, a whole or complex, a person or a chariot is nothing more than the parts that constitute it. Just as there is no chariot beyond the constituent physical parts associated with what we call a chariot, so too there is no soul or mind or person beyond the constituent parts associated with the idea of a person. Third, there is the concept of an item lacking its own being or its not having an essence. Some make the claim that anything that cannot be analyzed into other things has its own being or essence. The non-complex, meaning, or the simple item that has no parts, has an essence insofar as there are such things. Whether anything at all has an essence is a matter of dispute among different Buddhist traditions or sub-traditions. But that nothing complex has an essence is a matter of agreement. Lacking an essence and being dependent are inherently linked. Fourth, a claim very basic to the Buddhist tradition is that everything, or almost everything, depends for its existence and properties on the existence and properties of something else. This is the doctrine of dependent co-arising or dependent origination. Other than nirvana, everything is changing and impermanent. All appearances are interdependent and condition or affect one another in a continual process of coming into being and ceasing to be. All things arise and pass out of existence due to certain interrelated conditions linked through causal relationships. When the necessary and sufficient conditions are present, a particular thing comes to be. When the conditions change, the thing changes. When the necessary conditions are removed, the thing ceases to be. Two lines of dependence are included here. If an item, we'll call it X, came to exist at a given time that we'll call T1, it did so only because something existing prior to time T1 caused X to do so. Furthermore, X depends for its existence and properties on at least some of its colleagues that also exist at the same time. So dependence is both successive and simultaneous. The further claim is then added that whatever is dependent is momentary, so that nothing dependent can endure. The Buddha used the doctrine of dependent origination to explain the origin and elimination of suffering. This was done through the 12 linked chain of cause and effect, or the wheel of life, which connects the effects of past lives to the present and links past and present to the future. Experiences in the present are produced by the 12 linked chain of causation. The first and most basic cause of these experiences is ignorance, from which then emerge the other causal conditions. Ordinary experiences in this world are rooted in ignorance, especially that ignorance associated with the idea of an enduring self. The wheel of life resulting in rebirth can be broken if the causal chain is interrupted. The cessation of the cycle or rebirth is awakening or nirvana. The claims that result from applying these general strategies are quite radical in their consequences for the common sense view of the world. On that view, there are lots of enduring things, including oneself, one's friends, and family. Typically, at least many of these things are thought of as having essences. But for the Buddhist tradition, that is only conventional and constructed, and it will not survive critical analysis. For example, the concept of a mind or a body can be analyzed without remainder into the concepts or parts that are not themselves concepts of minds or bodies. The idea is that if some concept called X can be analyzed into or analyzed away into subconcepts that are not X's, then the X itself is composed of non-X's and is nothing more than a collection. The collection is not something more than its composite parts. There are other themes that lie deep in the Buddhist tradition. They include the doctrine that there are some absolutely simple things out of which the world is made. Among these simple things, everything is impermanent and nothing lasts very long. Further, it is typically held that no simple thing exists independently. Each simple item is caused to come into existence by something else, is affected by other items during its short existence, and then goes out of existence. Anything that is complex is made up of simple things, each of which exists momentarily. The claims that we have been discussing are metaphysical claims, claims concerning the most basic things that exist and how they are related. They seem to have no religious interest or importance. If one wants to understand Buddhist religion, however, one must realize that these claims are of enormous significance. The Buddhist criterion for what is religiously significant is what is taught by the texts that are acknowledged as authoritative and what is conducive to gaining enlightenment. For typical Buddhist traditions, having true beliefs regarding certain matters in metaphysics is a necessary condition of one's deep spiritual disease being cured. Now, the Buddhist assumption that anything that exists dependently must be impermanent, existing only for a while and then going out of existence, is not a necessary truth. So there is no logically necessary connection between dependence and impermanence. For a secular humanist, elementary particles endure for vast periods of time, and there seems to be nothing self contradictory about this view. This claim can be accepted by Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Jains, as well as by secularists. There seems to be good reason to accept it, but most Buddhist traditions reject any such duration. Let's look at appearances and reality. The assumption that anything that exists dependently necessarily lacks a nature or essence is also not a necessary truth. A palm tree exists dependently on its physical parts, but still has a nature or essence. A human body is composed of cells, which in turn are composed of particles, but it nonetheless has an essence or belongs to a kind or a category. At this point, a defender of Buddhist doctrine is likely to introduce another basic Buddhist teaching, sometimes called the doctrine of two truths. Although this description is misleading, the tradition makes a distinction between conventional truth and ultimate truth. A proposition is true if and only if things are the way it says they are. Such a proposition is an ultimate truth. A proposition is conventionally true if and only if it says how things seem to someone, but is not true about the way things actually are. So, thus, in plain English, conventional truths are false. This requires that there also be a truth about how things appear. In other words, there is a fact of the matter as to how things appear, as well as a fact of the matter as to how things are. The relevance of these considerations to the matters of dependent co-arising and the claim that if an item is dependent, then it has no nature or essence is as follows. While there appear to us to be trees and human bodies, there really are no such things. To make this idea more specific, one might hold that what lies behind talk of physical objects is merely the sensory content of certain conscious states. One would then be an idealist, maintaining that there are only minds and their mental states. Or one could hold that there are fundamental particles, and the things that we call trees and human bodies are nothing more than collections of these particles. Alternatively, one could hold that there are not even any elementary elements, either mental or physical. But the relevant point here is that if there are not any trees or human bodies, then there are not any essences or natures of trees or human bodies. So the basis of the dependent co-origination and the dependent then no essence claims entails the idea that ordinary everyday experience is radically misleading in that it includes belief in the existence of enduring and physical mental things when there really are not any. Typical Buddhist doctrines nonetheless require that there is something or other of which the doctrines are true. Within the Buddhist traditions, there is more than one account of what that is. But whatever is said to exist in virtue of which the basic Buddhist doctrine of co-origination is true, it must be multiple and not just one thing. And the multiple items in question must be causally related in such a way that what happens next depends for its existence on other items that exist now. The point is simple. If no causality, then no dependent co-origination. And if no dependence, then no inference from it to lack of natures or essences. There is a genuine risk that a tradition that makes a sharp distinction between appearance and reality, that says how things appear is radically different from how they are, and that adds that we make up how things appear to us, falls into a certain conceptual pit. The basic point is simple and straightforward. If these are constructions, then there are constructors that are not themselves constructions. However far removed from the everyday view the final Buddhist account of things may be, there still must be some account of some account or other of something that the revised story does fit, of which it is true. For the Buddhists, there are constraints on what sort of something that can be. Minimally, there cannot be enduring persons, lest enlightenment be impossible. It is this belief that if there are enduring selves, then enlightenment and escape from the cycle of rebirth is impossible, that makes the no self doctrine so essential in most of the Buddhist tradition. More generally, nothing non composite can endure. Were to endure is to last for as long as 2 moments in any other way than in virtue of having one part that exists at one time and another part that exists at a succeeding time. If non persons can endure, then perhaps persons can endure, which would be unthinkable in Buddhist traditions. The items that compose composite items cannot even endure. There are various strategies for giving an account of things that excludes any one item actually enduring, uh, rather than being made of successive momentary items. For considering them, however, it is worth remembering that historically there have been some Buddhist traditions which considered it necessary that there be enduring agents which are reincarnated and uh, on which karma operates. The Hudgalavadins, also known as the personalists, for example, this was a 3rd century AD school, This school held that a self or soul over and above the five aggregates exists and is reborn through the life cycles. But these perspectives are regarded as heretical by most Buddhists because of their denial of the central Buddhist doctrine of impermanence. However, such schools have thought that something must exist of which the impermanence doctrine is false, lest other Buddhist doctrines turn out to be true or turn out not to be true. It is worth emphasizing again that concern with what a doctrine entails and whether different doctrines are logically consistent is of significant concern within most Buddhist traditions, as it is throughout Indian and Eastern thought generally. From a Buddhist perspective, there is great danger in believing that one is a permanent or at least enduring being. According to Buddhism, such belief is false and must be abandoned in order for enlightenment to be attained. If we take ourselves to be selves or souls, permanent or enduring, then whatever must exist in order for us to possess that belief must exist. It is thus crucial for the Buddhist tradition that there being an enduring conscious mind is not a necessary condition of there being the belief that there is an enduring conscious mind. Suppose that what must exist in order for us to possess that belief is that we must be enduring conscious beings. Then any view that admits that we have this belief but denies that it is true must be false. In that case, one who wish to accept the standard of standard no self view must hold that the very conditions that standard Buddhist diagnosis describe as creating the disease that Buddhism addresses must exist for one to have diagnosed the disease. But the condition is a disease only if the view that there are enduring minds is false. Then a condition of having diagnosed disease or having the diagnosed disease is that it not be a disease after all. So, for most Buddhist traditions, the supposition must be false. It must not be the case that their being beliefs requires enduring believers. So, this is a lot of complicated and maybe confusing arguments, but think about the potential contradictions in this Buddhist view. That's the main point of what we're talking about. We'll continue this discussion next week. We didn't quite finish it today, but let me go ahead and give you the assignment. Again, the attendance assignment for week 6. Please write 1 to 2 paragraphs or 1 page maximum to answer this question. What is one main idea that you took from this week's lecture? And then if you want to do the extra credit assignment, again, write another 1 to 2 paragraphs, 1 page maximum to answer these 2 questions. Number 1, briefly describe the concept of religious exclusivism. Does it operate within both Christianity and Buddhism? Why or why not? If you read your opinions about that concept or about it, religious exclusivism and how you see it operating in one or both of those religions, or maybe not at all, and what your opinion is on this whole topic. And then number 2, describe the Buddhist concept of no self. And do you see any contradiction in this teaching? Why or why not? So that is the point of what we talked about the last several minutes of the lecture. And you can see based on what we said, if you think there is a contradiction in that teaching. And if so, maybe describe what do you think that is. And if you don't think that there's a contradiction, then describe why not. Uh, or if you hold to the Buddhist position, then maybe make a case for that specific view and why you don't see it as a contradiction. So that is the assignment again for this next week. Uh, so again, please email your assignment to me by next week or so, and um, I think I've responded to all of your emails, um, except for maybe the past couple of days, and I am again grading your tests. Hopefully, have those done. If not the next week, then the week after, but try to get them done as soon as I can. So, again, if you want to know your grade, just email me, let me know. Um, and we have 3 more meetings of this class with one holiday just before the end. So, hope you're enjoying the class again and learning a lot. Wish you all a great week. We will see you next time. Take care.